Fourth Avenue to Techwood Drive, O'Leary to Key. It's WreckTalk.
What is going on, everyone, and welcome to WreckTalk. And look, just bear with me. I'm about half lit up over this because this is honestly sad in a lot of ways. It's silly. It doesn't achieve its goal, which is to preserve, the ACC. I guess, it delays probably the inevitable. But if you haven't heard, ESPN dropped an article today. We're going to read it. We're going to look at it. Sources, FSU, Clemson expected to reach a settlement with the ACC. Now, we should back up some before we get into this. Back up a year ago from now, every mouth-breathing idiot, Florida State fan, certain YouTube channels, college football addiction, double slaw, no brain cells. We're out of the ACC. We're out of the ACC yesterday. We're going to be out before June. Then, go forward to 2 months ago, FSU said, who said we ever wanted out of the ACC? We never said we wanted out of the ACC, even though there's court documents where they're stating the date that they're leaving the ACC. Now, we couldn't have had a more poetic outcome this year where Florida State goes 2-10. Instead of dressing a football team to play, they dress, 11 Pee Wee Hermans to do something that they call playing football, which probably made them a little more willing to, all right, we need to settle this. Now, why would the ACC want to settle this? Well, I'm sure they have a ton of money tied up into this lawsuit, and they'd rather not do it, right? So, let's look at this. It says Florida State and Clemson will vote on Tuesday, that will be tomorrow at the time of recording this video, on an agreement that would ultimately result in the settlement of 4 ongoing lawsuits between the schools and the ACC, and a new revenue sharing distribution strategy that would solidify the conference membership for the near future, sources told ESPN on Monday, which is today. Now, what you might be wondering is, they're voting on revenue sharing for the rest of the conference. What about the other schools? Do they get a say-so in it? Miami, North Carolina, Georgia Tech, Boston College, Wake Forest, Pitt, Syracuse, Duke. Nope. They don't get any say-so in this, which is maybe the most absurd thing with this. Tell me how, let's say me and you watching this video are tied up in litigation, how we get to make decisions for how other people should be paid or what they're able to do. Makes no sense to me. The ACC Board of Directors is scheduled to hold a call Tuesday to go over the settlement terms. In addition, Florida State and Clemson have both called board meetings to present the terms at noon Tuesday, which is tomorrow. All 3 boards must agree to the settlement for it to move forward, but sources throughout the league expect the deal to be reached. Well, of course it is, because there's only 3 parties involved, all of which want to end this, 2 of which, being Florida State and Clemson, are going to be the beneficiaries of it. According to sources, the settlement includes 2 key objectives: establishing a new revenue distribution model based on viewership and a change in the financial penalties for exiting the league's grant of rights before its conclusion in June 2036. I hate to say it, but I think, we've been saying it a while, the death of the ACC. I think this is the death of the ACC. Because as soon as they can exit the ACC, and it's financially advantageous for them to do so, or they don't have to pay near the penalty, they're gone. Now, as far as I'm concerned, more power to you. Because if you're a Florida State fan, let me talk directly to you, for a second. I'm going to try and talk in simple terms that you can understand. Maybe I could put a clown wig on or something. This seems to be something y'all understand a little better. Go to the SEC. And you know what they're going to say? All right, well, you're going to have to take a decreased revenue share for X number of years. And Florida State's going to say, oh, we're not doing that. We're Florida State. Well, you know who we are? We're Florida State. We're not doing a decreased revenue share. In fact, we want an uneven share that favors us in your conference. And you know what the SEC is going to say? Shove it up your ass. We don't need you. You need us. You've made an ass of yourself now for almost 2 years straight. So you don't have much goodwill going to another conference anyways, because I'm sure their fear is going to be, well, hey, if we let them in, they're just going to cause a bunch of problems anyways. There's not a scenario, and I know you can never convince a Florida State fan of this, where you go to the Big Ten or you go to the SEC and you're getting a full share. They don't have to offer you that. You need them. What are you going to, and then you've sued everyone you could up to that point. They might not let you in just on the fact that, hey, they might be in an uneven revenue share. Let's say they go to the SEC, and 4 years in, they decide, you know what, that's not fair. We're suing the SEC now. That this lessens, and it doesn't lay out how it lessens the financial penalties, because up to this point, it's been like $100 $200 million exit fee, and they get all of your media rights. So if part of this deal is that they don't owe their media rights any longer, then the SEC just signed their own death warrant, and I don't really get it. This new revenue model or brand initiative, all right, so now we're into marketing speak. Brand initiative is based on a 5-year rolling average of TV ratings, though some logistics of this formula remain tricky, including how to properly average games on the unrated ACC network or subscription channels, right? So in other words, these TV ratings are based off cable numbers. If you're on a subscription service, Apple TV, the ACC network is like a subscription thing. Like those aren't counted in it. So I guess it remains unseen how all of that is going to be calculated. And just as someone who's not in the good old boys club here of Clemson and Florida State, I don't trust for 1 second how that's calculated at this point. It needs to be clearly stated. We'll get more information on this tomorrow. We'll see if it's laid out very clearly. But anyways, the brand initiative will be funded through a split in the league's TV revenue, with 40% of it evenly distributed among the 14 longstanding members, and 60% toward the brand initiative and distributed based on TV ratings. So a few teams are going to get 60% who fit this brand initiative. The rest of you get 40%. And look, this is also, it's not the destruction of college football, but this is the way everything's going now. Look at the way the playoffs are done now. The SEC and Big get the majority of it. Everyone else gets some crumbs. Forget about it if you're not in one of the Power 4 conferences. And that's its own thing too, right? You get 12-team playoff, 4 SEC, 4 Big 10, 2 Big 12, 2 ACC, and then 2 at large. You're not going to see a group of 5 team in the playoffs anymore, if I had to guess. Also, what happens if there's a year where the ACC has, 6 ranked teams, and the SEC only has 3 or something? All right, are you going to let an unranked SEC team in over a ranked ACC team? Well, yeah, because if we were in the ACC, man, we would never lose a game, and we would win 223-0 every time. Look, no one, in the words of Polly Walnuts, no one knows what the future holds, my little friend. All right? And things can change. Also, all of this is just assuming TV revenue and contract payout is just going to keep skyrocketing. There is one thing I am 1000% sure of, no doubt in my mind. This trend cannot continue forever. At some point, it's either got a plateau or it's going to start coming back down. So who knows where we are in the future? Let's continue. Top earners are expected to net an additional $15 million or more, according to sources. While some schools will see a net reduction in annual payout of up to about $7 million annually, an acceptable loss, according to several administrators at schools likely to be impacted, in exchange for some near-term stability. Notice how they say near-term. None of this is long-term. None of this saves your conference. This is just prolonging what's probably inevitable at this point. And I have a hard time, I don't know where they're getting that from, accepting, look, my team's in that Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Wake, Pitt, Boston College, Duke. They would just be like, okay, yeah, I'm totally fine with taking a $7 million decrease in my conference share. Also, a $7 million decrease I didn't get to vote on. I didn't get a say-so in. I didn't even get to make a statement about through email. I didn't get to Morse code a telegram to anybody. It's insane. It's insane, and you're doing it for, at most, maybe 5 years of some stability in your conference. I don't know. Maybe the ACC's thinking, well, we've bought ourselves some time, and then we'll address more, when we get there. I don't know. But a $7 million hit is not small. The brand initiative is expecting to begin for this coming fiscal year. So I take that to mean that this next football season we have coming up, these changes are going to go into effect. The brand fund combined with the separate success initiatives fund approved in 2023. Yeah, that's right. If you've forgotten, we've already done a success initiative that said, like, hey, if you make an ACC title game, I think if you make the playoffs, you make a national, like, you get more money for all that. Well, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that because Florida State went 2-10 last year. So that's not acceptable. So we got to do something else. Got to do something else because maybe Florida State goes 2-10 and makes an embarrassment of themselves, and we need another way. Yeah. So the separate success initiatives funds approved in 2023 and enacted last year that reward schools for postseason appearances would allow teams that hit necessary benchmarks in each to close the revenue gap with the SEC and Big Ten, possibly adding in the neighborhood of $30 million or more annually should a school make a deep run into the college football playoff or NCAA basketball tournament and lead the way in TV ratings. Now, I've been in a chat with the college football mafia guys, and from what look, they're a little bit more educated on these subjects than I am. I'm generally the guy that just rants and makes a fool of myself. But what they're saying isn't known is what happens. Let's say Wake wins the ACC next year. So they're number one in initiative for the conference, but let's say they're 11th in brand initiative. How do you calculate their payout in that? In other words, how heavily weighted is brand initiative and how heavily weighted is the success initiative? So, from what we're seeing here, you could close this $30 billion revenue gap if you make a deep run in the playoffs. I imagine, though, that's only if you're Clemson or Florida State, or you're already in the top of this rolling average, right? Let's continue. By the way, if I had to guess, brand initiative is way more heavily weighted than the success initiative is. The success initiatives are largely funded through money generated by the new expanded college football playoff and additional revenue generated by the additions of Sanford Stanford, Cal, and SMU, each of which is taking a reduced portion of money over the next 6 to 8 years, while the new brand initiative will involve some schools in the conference receiving less TV revenue than before. So think if you're Cal or Stanford, the Pac 12 disintegrated due to really no fault of your own. And I guess there'll be some people that say, well, they weren't pulling their weight and their lead. Well, whatever. Set that aside for a second. The conference imploded. They couldn't do anything about it. So they're forced to take a reduced revenue in the ACC because they didn't have a choice. And then they might be getting hit on top of that. So they're taking a reduced cut in revenue. And then due to the brand initiative, they might be hit for another few million, as well as I read this. It's something else. SMU, I think, just said, hey, we won't take anything for 7 years. As a result of their inclusion in the college football playoff this past season, SMU athletic director said the Mustangs and Tigers each earned $4 million through the Success Initiative. All right, so even though they're a new member, they still qualify for that Success Initiative. And I'm sure Florida State saw that and said, man, that ain't right, man. That's not right. We need some of that money. The only reason people are watching them is because of us. Sources have suggested Clemson and Florida State would be amongst the biggest winners of this brand-based distribution. No wonder they're the only sons of bitches voting on it. So yeah, I'm sure that they're not going to agree and all vote on something that screws them. Though North Carolina and Miami are others expected to come out with a higher payout. How well watched is North Carolina even? I don't know that that's true, by the way. I think it's true for Miami. Obviously, they had a good season last year. They are a national brand, like Clemson, like Florida State is. North Carolina is not a national football brand. They're not. The only reason I can think that they're included in this is because they've hired Bill Belichick, and they'll have the best TV ratings they've probably ever had this coming up season because of that. Interesting thing here. Now, if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you already knew this was true. Georgia Tech was actually the highest rated program in 2024 in the ACC. Based in part on a Week 0 game against Florida State and a 7 overtime thriller against Georgia on the final Friday of the regular season. Also, Miami, we upset Miami as well. Basketball ratings will be included in the brand initiative too, but at a smaller rate than football, which is responsible for about 75% of the league's TV revenue. I argued some on Pigs Compete show about this. Yeah, Georgia Tech was the highest in TV ratings last year, but this is a 5-year rolling average. So only 3 years of that, or only 2 years of that are key. 3 years of that were from Shithead Collins that tried to. He should be arrested for attempted murder for what he did to Georgia Tech, where we probably have the worst TV ratings in the conference. So I'm not so sure that Georgia Tech won't take less money in this. But, we didn't get a say-so in it. If ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips is able to get this to the finish line Tuesday, it would be a big win for him and for the conference during this time of unprecedented change in college athletics, particularly for a league that many speculated would break apart when litigation between the ACC and Florida State and Clemson began in 2023. Well, many people are dumbasses, though. That's the thing. Just go look anywhere on the internet. I would say most people are dumbasses. Most people just type in imright.com. Look, yep, says I'm right. Yep, went to imright.com, says I'm right. It wasn't clear at all that the ACC was going to disintegrate once Florida State and Clemson sued the ACC. What a lot of people were speculating is that they were going to get out of the ACC lickety-split like that. Didn't happen. There's also, to me, a very biased slant to this article. It's also not clear to me that this is clearly a victory for the ACC. Because as we'll get into it further. Let's just keep reading, but it's not clear to me that this is a win for the ACC. One, what is the signal to the rest of the ACC? You should get mad and sue the ACC to get what you want. That's what Florida State did. Not only did they get mad, sue the ACC, put a baby bottle in their mouth, cry, bitch, whine, complain, and then go 2-10. They do all that, sue the ACC, and because this is a 5-year rolling average, they're going to get an uneven payout, and it's going to favor them. So the message is, for the rest of the teams in the ACC, we should just sue the ACC. It looks like it's going to implode anyways, and maybe we can prevent taking a potential $7.5 million hit to our bottom line. Do I want that to happen? No. Am I advocating for that to happen? No. Do I want Georgia Tech to sue the ACC? No, because I'm not a moronic Florida State fan. But that is the message that you're sending to the league. Again, especially if it looks like this thing is just going to blow up anyways, if they've decreased the buyout going into like, 2029, I think it mentions later. Both schools would consider it a win as well after they decided to file lawsuits in their home states in hopes of extracting. Is that what it says? I guess that's a weird way. Extricating. I'm not even gonna. I can't hardly see. I'm reading this in my OBS. In hopes of leaving the ACC and getting out of the grant of rights. If you're a Florida State fan, type how I can't read below. Nothing new. According to Florida State's attorneys, could have meant paying as much as $700 million to leave the conference. The ACC countersued both schools to preserve the grant of rights agreement through 2036. Although the settlement would not make substantive changes to the grant of rights, it is expected that there will be declining financial penalties for both schools that exit before 2036, with the steepest decreases coming after 2030. Something that would apply to any ACC school, not just Clemson and Florida State. Let me tell you why that's important. What is it? It's 2025. It's no mistake that this running average is 5 years and not 2 or 3. Why? Because according to this, and look, nothing of there aren't specific details in this. By 2030, it looks like it could be very possible for them to leave the ACC. Well, that's 5 years from now. So by the time they might get an uneven revenue share that could hurt them, and I'm not saying this would happen, but let's just say in a scenario where Florida State keeps shitting their pants instead of playing football, and I don't know, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, they remain up and they overtake Florida State in the brand initiative. By the time that could ever hurt them, it looks like they could get out of the ACC. Again, don't get to vote on it. They're the only people that get to vote on it. It's horseshit. It's absolute bullshit. Let's just call it what it is. The specific figures for schools to get released from the grant of rights were not readily available, but the total cost to exit the league after 2029 or 30 is expected to drop below $100 million, sources told. The current language would require any school exiting before June 2036 to pay 3 times the operating budget, a figure that would be about $120 million, plus control of the team's media rights through the conclusion of the grant of rights. Now, the first part really does, it's a lot of money, pales into comparison to the second part, which is, yeah, you can leave the ACC, but all of your media rights, all the money generated, still comes to the ACC. I've read this article and it's still not clear to me how that's changed in this settlement. Again, my intuition says that is going to be nerfed somewhat. This was seen as a critical piece to the settlement, allowing the flexibility for ACC schools, particularly beyond the 2030 season, when TV deals for the Big Ten, which ends the 29-30 season, Big 12, 2030, and the next iteration of college football playoffs, which will renew in 2031, a figure Florida State's attorney valued more than $500 million over 10 years ago. Sources told ESPN that there'd just be one number to exit the league, not a combination of the estimated, not the combination estimated by Florida State of a traditional exit fee and the loss of media from the grant of rights. So yes, now they've lined it up where they can exit the ACC, or that's how I'm reading this, by the time all these other media rights deals with the SEC, Big Ten, and college football playoffs end. Also, by the time that they could get hurt with an uneven revenue share in the ACC. In addition to securing the Success and Brands initiative viewed within the league as progressive ideas to help incentivize winning, Phillips also guided the recently announced ESPN option pickup to continue broadcasting the ACC through 2036. Yeah, so he's saying, look, Phillips is saying all we're doing, this is to help incentivize winning, guys, which is a big horseshit fu to the rest of the schools. Because if it was, we already had something to incentivize winning. All right. Well, we needed more money. We needed to be able to give more money to people. If all you cared about was incentivizing winning, then just take the top 4 schools by ACC record and pay them the 60% uneven revenue share you want to do. But you can't do that because Florida State's absolute ass right now. So you've always got to have your finger on the scale. And look, this isn't just the ACC. The whole landscape of college football is totally screwed from a fan's perspective. You know, we already talked about the college football playoffs. Yep, 4 teams for the SEC, 4 teams for the Big Ten, 2 for everybody else, 2 at large. Uneven revenue share to the SEC and Big Ten, independent of the number of teams they put into it. Let me say that again. Independent of the number of teams that they get that they put in. Now, they're going to get their teams in. The ACC was the first one I remember talking about. We're going to have a regular season champion that doesn't play in the SEC or the ACC tournament. We're going to have an ACC tournament between the other 4 teams, and then they'll get one of the spots. But we don't want our champion to have to play an extra game before they go in the playoffs, even though they get a first-round bye for it. What happened to all the teams that got first-round byes this year? I think they lost. I think all of them lost. But hey, we don't like it. Now the SEC is talking about this of having like an 8-team tournament and a regular season champion, and you're going to have 3 more games or something. This might even affect rivalry week. Now we're not doing spring games anymore because people might get to scout our team. People could get hurt. The majority of the Power 4 is now canceling all of their non-con games with anyone that's worth a shit. And at the end of the day, it's just like, okay. I think there's going to come a day where this starts to roll back the other way, though. Didn't know I was a poet. Look, people have less money, disposable income than they probably have in some time, you know, because now there's no way for you to even watch all the games. You got to get this streaming service and you got to pay for cable. You got to pay for this. If you want to go to a game, my God, it's an arm and a leg. At some point, people might just stop watching. I asked this on Pigskin Pete's show, like how much of this viewership is propped up by gambling too? You know, what if it's a lot? What if for some reason the government decides to crack down on that? Who knows? The point being is a lot of things could change in the next 5 years where maybe the next media deal isn't more than this one. All right. And then Florida State, who thinks that the solution to all their problems is getting into another conference, might see that that's not the case. Now, as for me, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a homer, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are surprised what their options are and really where they stand. I think Georgia Tech is in a decent position. They haven't said anything. They're on the rise. They're in Atlanta. I think they're in a better spot than North Carolina. You know, I don't want the ACC to end. What I'm saying is, again, Florida State, you might be surprised at the fact that the SEC and Big Ten are just not jumping at you because of the issues that you've had. And the well might not be as plentiful when you get there. They're definitely not going to let you come in without taking a reduced share. I know that. So let me know what you guys think. Like, I'm still going to watch college football, but most college football fans are not like me, right? What do you think about this? If you're a Florida State fan, I doubt that you're watching the video at this point because I shit on you endlessly. But what do you think? If you're a Clemson fan, I've kind of given you a pass. But what do you guys think? If you're an if your team is an ACC school, how do you feel about just being given the middle finger and not you don't get a say so in this? You might be $7.5 million lighter in your athletic department. This is why I didn't upload for a while, because like a lot of times when I look at news coming into my phone about college football, it's a bunch of freaking bullshit like this. That's the truth. Y'all have a good one.